questions as we're moving through, please feel free to just raise your hand. I'm happy to answer your questions as we go through everything. So first of all, thank you all so much for being here and for agreeing to work the polls on Election Day. It's just so appreciated. So just a brief overview of what we're going to be going through today in training. So some general miscellaneous overview information, what Election Day looks like, what happens at the polls. As some of you may have already noticed, we do have quite a few new poll workers. So I appreciate you more seasoned poll workers taking them under your wing and teaching them the ropes. So thank you in advance for that. We'll go over the election inspector, that is you, what your duties are for the day, a brief Badger Book overview. We'll talk a little bit about observers, curbside voting, and then go over the end of night duties. So again, thank you again all for your service to the voters of the city of Manitowoc. The February 15th spring primary is the first election in this 2-year election term. Like I had mentioned, we do have some brand new folks working the polls, and I'm also always looking for new chief inspectors. So if any of you have the urge to make a few more dollars on election day and be promoted to chief, please see me after the training. It's not that bad, I promise, right, chiefs? Nod, yep.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's fun. Tim says it's fun. So this will all be available for you all on all of your checklists and materials that are provided you on election morning. There is a new security code for the express vote and for the DS200. We are going with election with a capital E. I realize this is all caps. That's misleading. It's just capital E election 22. But that'll be on your opening checklist for you in the morning. We have one new polling location, so if you are serving in District 8, you have been upgraded to the Lincoln Park Field House. Much more spacious, it should be much less chilly as the doors are opening and people are coming in. So I'm hoping that this will work out pretty great for you. There's a few other new things with this election. The first being we have these tri-fold tag board signs for your signs that you have to post. They'll be delivered to your polling place already for you, so all you'll have to do is find a place to set it up. It'll set on its own, and that takes care of all of your signs that need to be posting. So it's all in one spot. You don't have to worry about taping them or putting them up anywhere. It's just on that tri-fold. It was Jenny in our office's idea, I think, or was that your idea, Amanda? It was Amanda's idea, I'm sorry. Jenny made them, but it was Amanda's idea, so she deserves all the credit. And you can leave them there at the end of the night, too. We'll pick them up on Wednesday. We do have new curbside voting signs as well with a doorbell. The doorbell is going to be, there's a spot to Velcro it to the sign, so you will need to add that to something to do in the morning. And we have cones to set aside to kind of mark out a spot for these curbside voters. This is also added to your morning checklist, but this should make the curbside voting process hopefully a little easier. Please take notes if something's not working with this and we can adjust. This is our first run with these signs and the doorbells. So if you're like, oh, I wonder if we tried this, if it would make it easier, let us know. We're happy to adjust for April and moving forward. And then the last thing is all of the Badger books have gone through an update. So they should be faster, they should be less glitchy, and even easier, hopefully. We're not sending them for February, but something to keep in mind for April is they have told us that they have really improved the scanning capabilities. So there's like a barcode scanner. So we'll be sending them for April. For checking in voters, you should be able to scan driver's licenses and pull up the voter right in the Badger book. Same for voter registration. So if they have a state ID or driver's license, we can scan those and pull the information in. We hadn't sent them in the past because it was really a slow process, but they've told us that it's good now. So if we send them and it's not good, just don't use them. There's no requirement to use them. So what's on the ballot? There is only one contest on the February ballot. It is the Manitowoc Public School District School Board Member at Large. It is a vote for not more than 3. There are 7 candidates on the ballot. 6 of the top 6 will be on the April ballot. If there are any registered write-ins, we will include that list of information with your election day supplies. And this would only be given out to voters who specifically ask, hey, are there any registered write-ins for this contest? As of right now, we don't have any. The deadline as always, is tomorrow at noon for folks to register as a registered write-in for the election. Here are some phone numbers for you to keep handy on Election Day. We try to post these in lots of different spots so you have them handy. Feel free to throw these numbers into your cell phones too. That is my cell phone number and then my office number. We're here to help all day. We have staff in the office that can make runs out to your polling place if you need help troubleshooting. We can walk you through solutions. If something really strange comes up and you're just not sure, just give us a call. We are happy to help. I am prepared to start answering calls as early as 6 a.m. on election morning. So if something's not quite right when you're getting set up, shoot me a text, give me a call. Happy to help you figure out whatever you need to. So for all of your polling locations, each polling place will have 5 election inspectors. Just a reminder that in all of our polling places, we are guests in this space, so please just be respectful of that. Turnout could be low, which may make for a very long day, so I'm just wanting to thank you all in advance for your patience as you get through the day. But since we haven't had an election since last April, I think this is a nice opportunity for everyone to get ready for the rest of the elections this year. We will have April, we will have August, and we will of course have November this year in 2022. So as far as opening the polls must open promptly at 7 a.m. To officially open the polls, the chief inspector will have verified that the tamper evidence seal number and is what matches your inspector statement. All of the doors have to be unlocked and officially announces that the polls are open. So hear ye, the polls are open. Again, they open promptly at 7. They also close promptly at 8 p.m. However, anyone that is in line to vote at 8 p.m. must be allowed to vote. So throughout the day, you may want to designate someone to be what we call the end-of-line officer, which would be the person to stand behind that last voter at 8 p.m. To kind of be the cutoff for who may be permitted to vote that evening. Unfortunately, the election will not be postponed or canceled due to inclement weather, so please plan accordingly. I'll be very honest, I haven't even looked at the forecast for next week, but I think we'll be okay. But just a heads up, if you wake up to snow, don't expect that the election will be canceled. What's that? Oh, well, we can handle that, right? If anyone is stationed here at the City Hall District 4 polling place, you can park in the employee parking lot right over here in any stalls that have blue lines and a blue E in them. If there is snow on the ground, they may be kind of difficult to see, so it's really any of the middle section of the parking lot. As we get closer towards the businesses, I think I'm pointing the right way, over there, some of those spots are leased. There are signs for the leased parking, so if you are parking a little further back in the parking lot, just keep an eye on those signs. Unfortunately, when folks do park in the leased stalls, they typically end up with a parking ticket, and then I have to sweet talk the police department to make it go away. So if you could just try to park in an employee spot, I would greatly appreciate that. So you will notice, chiefs, specifically that your carts and totes are around here. If you leave them here, we'll deliver them to your polling place on Election Day. I know some of you like to take them and go through and look and see what you've got, which is totally fine. But if it ends up here at the end of the day, just know that we will deliver it to your polling place for you. And we will continue, and I'm not really seeing this go away ever, but we'll have that separate PPE tote for you too that'll have masks and gloves and sanitizer and paper towel and cleaning supplies and all of that. So. Are we going to be required to wear masks? Nope. Nope, it's all personal preference. So poll workers aren't required to, voters aren't required to, but obviously just be respectful of anyone's decision to do that. So just an overview of the duties for the poll workers. So the chief inspector serves as the liaison between the election inspectors and the municipal clerk and is in charge of the polling place on election day. Election inspectors assist with all election day activities. Oh. What happened? Uh-oh. I believe you. I believe you. All right, well, do you want to reset the system? Do you remember how to do that? In the little room, it's a switch. And I'm just, oh, wait. Well, I got it over here, so let's keep going. Okay. So one of the main things, or the first step would be checking in the voters, so that's done on the Badger book. The voter states their name, shows their ID, and signs the Badger book. Then the voter with their number slip would head over to the ballot table to trade their number slip for a ballot. The ballot does need to be initialed by 2 poll workers. Then the voter will go to their booth, vote their ballot, and insert it into the tabulator. It's always helpful to have someone kind of monitoring the tabulator, giving, of course, the voter enough space that their vote would be confidential. But if the ballot is rejected, you can assist the voter in correcting the situation. Why might the tabulator reject a ballot? For this election, most likely it's going to be an overvote. So it's vote for not more than 3. If a voter votes for 4, the screen's going to say, you voted for too many people. It'll spit the ballot back out. If the voter says, nope, I wanted to vote for 4, you can say, that's fine. None of your votes will be counted. If they say perfect, you can hit the cast ballot, and that's what goes in. I mean, who knows why people do what they do, right? If they're like, oh, shoot, I voted for too many, they can, of course, spoil their ballot up to 3 times. So then we'd have them spoil their ballot, issue them a new ballot. If they make a similar mistake on ballot number 2, you may want to encourage them to go the express vote route because that will not let them overvote. So also, sometimes people like to vote blank ballots. So the machine's going to give you a similar error that says, this is a blank ballot. Again, that's the voter's choice, and if they want to vote it, you just hit the cast button and the blank ballot will go into the machine. They're like, oh, I totally forgot to vote for anyone. I mean, at that point, they could probably just take their ballot to a voting booth and mark it and then put it in the tabulator. What's that? No, because unless you cast it. When it gives you that error and it spits it back out, it hasn't been counted yet. Yep. And then the express vote, so assist voters if they need it with the express vote. That is the machine that's the ADA machine that marks the ballot. However, any voter may use the express vote. So if you've got lines at the polls or if folks are curious about how it works, feel free to push the express vote ballots. Anyone can use them. And then voter registration. So we help voters register to vote and verify their proof of residency. So we'll go over in a little more detail in a little later on in the presentation, registering to vote, but that registration also takes place on the Badger books. Again, I had mentioned that 2 poll workers need to initial the ballots, so if you so desire, you can have 1 poll worker initial a stack to get the day started. However, we shouldn't be throwing that second initial on the ballot until that ballot is going to be handed over to the voter. So if you have your 2 people at the ballot table, the person on the left or whatever has already thrown their initial on, then the voter comes, and then the other person at the ballot table should put their initial on before handing it directly to the voter. That's exactly, it's because you voted absentee. So absentee ballots only need to be initialed by the municipal or deputy clerk. Yep, that's a great question. Yes?
What if they come in with their absentee ballot?
Send them here. Yep, we'll get to that, but absentee ballots need to be turned into City Hall. This is where all of the absentee ballots are processed by 8 p.m. to be counted. So if they have their voted absentee ballot and they want to hand it in, tell them to come here. The clerk's office is open 7:30 to 4:30. Outside of those hours, we have a drop box or a drop slot in the building on the southwest side of the building that they can place it in. And we also have a locked receptacle that will go outside of this room once the city clerk's office is closed for the day at 4:30. Amanda and I check those bins right at 8 o'clock. So as long as they get it here by 8, they should be good. We do have the I voted stickers, so if you can, try to keep them away from the tabulator just to avoid them possibly going in the tabulator. A sticker going through the machine could really mess some stuff up for it. Just something to keep in mind. Do you happen to know the address of your polling place in case you need to call 911? It is on your street list that you have. Hopefully you don't ever have to run into that, but just something to kind of keep in mind. Also, each polling place is equipped with an election day contingency plan. Chiefs, please know where this is in case you need it. Hopefully you don't, but there's lots of information. If something very catastrophic or very out of the ordinary or awful happens, that's going to be a really good place for you to start. If there's an emergency, of course, dial 911 to get immediate assistance. A few miscellaneous information, or a few points of information. You won't get a W-2 from the city. If you have received over $600 from us in a calendar year, you will get a 1099. And then anyone trying to return an absentee ballot to your polling place should be instructed to bring it here to City Hall. So what happens on Election Day? Registered voters vote, qualified electors register to vote, and then please bring those absentee ballots here, or instruct them to bring their absentee ballots here. If you need to empty any ballots from your DS200 during the day, this should only happen if necessary. And if you're doing that, have two people involved in the process and announce what you're doing and why you're doing it, so anyone that's in there voting or observing understands what's happening. And then if you are pulling ballots, place that in a secured ballot box and record what you're doing and when you're doing it on the inspector statement. It says ballot box, but we're actually gonna have ballot bags for this election from the county, because all of the ballots are going to the school district after this. So you won't have those big white boxes, they'll be in big clear white bags. Please remember to call in your 11 a.m. totals to the clerk's office. We do have media that waits for these totals for the noon news. And then also be sure to review your vote by hour sheet throughout the day. A reminder that this is what your vote by hour sheet looks like. It's really helpful to make sure that you're staying on track in terms of being reconciled. So at least hourly, you can certainly verify and reconcile more than hourly if you'd like, but at least hourly. So stay reconciled. What does that actually mean? That the number of voters equals the number of ballots that have gone into the tabulator. So checking at least hourly, it's so much easier to figure out what went wrong if we can kind of pinpoint a time frame when something happened and jogs your memory. Oh yeah, I think so-and-so took a ballot and then they threw it in the trash on their way out. I'm like, okay, well that would make our numbers off. Also, if you experience a jam at all, try to keep an eye on the DS200 screen, because it will tell you if the ballot's been counted. So if counted, you'll have to open that lower area and place the ballot in. If not counted, once you clear the jam, you can just feed it into the tabulator as you normally would. So this is what you'll see on the DS200. I know the text on this is really difficult to read, but that green check mark is telling you your ballot has been counted. So if you pull that piece of paper out, you definitely don't want to refeed it through the tabulator, or that ballot's going to have been counted twice. If you see this stop sign, ballot jam, your ballot has not been counted, this would be a time when you would want to feed that back through the tabulator. Hopefully not having any absentee ballots or folded ballots, you won't experience too many jams, but it does happen from time to time. If for some reason your numbers don't match at the end of the night, we do need to figure out why. So possible scenarios, the Badger Book issued duplicate numbers. If you notice this during the day, write that on your inspector statement, and if that's the one way you're off at the end of the night, you can just write that on your tally sheet and inspector statement, and we're good to go. Did a ballot get fed through the machine twice? Did a voter leave without feeding their ballot through the tabulator? The Wisconsin Elections Commission requires that we have an answer for any discrepancies. So please use your inspector statement throughout the day. It's a huge help. I actually do read all of those when they come back. And just any oddity, anything that you can think of, jot it down throughout the day. I really, there shouldn't be any blank inspector statements coming back at the end of the day. So just jot any of those notes down and we can certainly help you reconcile and figure out why your count might be off. If you're convinced that the Badger Book issued numbers appropriately, double check your supplemental list, and we'll get to that supplemental list a little later, but that's an extra paper list for folks that may not be in the Badger Book. So if you had someone coming in and for whatever reason they weren't able to register to vote on the Badger Book, or they registered to vote in the closed registration period, they'd be on that supplemental list. Just make sure you're checking that and adding those numbers to your totals at the end of the night. If for some reason you had to remake ballots, make sure that only one was tabulated. So this would be where you'd be looking through the ballots at the end of the night and making sure that not both the original and the duplicate were fed through the machine. Given that we don't have any absentee ballots at this polling place, I really don't see any reason why we'd need to remake ballots, because voters should be feeding their ballots into the machine, and then it's either gonna take it or it's going to spit it out, and then that voter could spoil it if they made a mistake. So that's not the same thing. So I'm not really expecting that you'll have any remade ballots.
What does it mean when you say spoil?
That would be the voter choosing, like, they screwed up their ballot they voted for the wrong person, that voter could spoil their ballot, which means they're gonna like put a little tear in it, give it back to the poll book table, and that would be their kind of three-strike situation where they could be issued a new ballot and vote that one. Yeah,
What if somebody comes in with an absentee ballot and they want to spoil it?
they should just. You could,
Last time we ripped back,
yeah,
not in half, just rip it, and then we give them.
you can do that. What's that? Yeah, but it's kind of, I don't like, yeah. Yeah, if they bring it in and it's not voted and they want to vote at the polls, I would say that's probably the best thing to do. Take it, put a little tear in it, notate it on the inspector statement, and then just keep that in your you have a spoiled ballot envelope as part of all your supplies, just keep it in there.
Along with the envelope,
Yep,
that both of them are in there.
yep. Yeah, and you wouldn't even have to like open it or anything, you just keep it. And then if your numbers still don't match, you can always count the ballots. If after you've counted the ballots and you're still not matching number of ballots to number of voters, call me and I'll help you figure out how we can solve the mystery. And at this point, Amanda's gonna start talking for a little while, so you get a break from me for a minute.
So this is the process of what happens at the Badger Book table. So obviously the voter still has to state their name, show their photo ID, and sign the Badger Book. Signing the Badger Book is a requirement. If they refuse to sign it, they cannot get a ballot and they cannot vote. It does not have to be legible. They could just make a mark, an X, just touch the screen. That is counted. For acceptable photo ID, Wisconsin issued driver's license, even if it's been suspended or revoked. Wisconsin also issues identification cards, so that would also be acceptable. Military IDs, a passport or card, and obviously the certificate of naturalization if it's, as long as it's a current photo of them. You are allowed to use driver's license that are expired to the last general election. And when the Badger Book and you select what they provide you for a photo ID, it does state the requirements for each photo ID on there. An identification card, this is more photo ID. Identification card, a driver's license receipt. If you've gone to the DMV recently, you realize you don't actually get a card when you leave there. They give you a piece of paper that is printed out. That is acceptable. Or the receipt for that. Veterans Affairs ID card. And then what to look on the photo ID. So it must reasonably resemble the elector. The elector's name must match their voter registration. It's not necessarily identical. Sometimes we have registrations that happened numerous years ago when it might have been abbreviated, like a Suzanne might be a Sue. That is acceptable. The expiration date of the photo ID must meet what the Badger Book is listed as, and it does not have to include the current address.
I just put this slide in here just to notate that there are a couple of acceptable photo IDs that don't actually contain a photo. They're so uncommon, but just knowing that they are an option, I wouldn't even read too much into this. I don't know that anyone around here ever provides that. But like Amanda had said, that the Badger Book is gonna list every acceptable option. So if somebody is providing something that's not on that list on that Badger Book, it's not an acceptable photo ID.
I have a question, because I have a state ID with a photo on it, the seal of Wisconsin, but I am a state employee. So it wasn't DOT issued, it was issued by my employer, the state of Wisconsin. That does not count.
Oh, I don't,
It's state ID, I thought. Yeah, Wisconsin state ID.
is that what it looks like?
No, it's an employee ID card, but it has my picture, my name, my agency, the seal of Wisconsin. I don't have it with me, but I have used it as backup proof of identification in the past.
Yeah.
But it is a photo ID that is issued by the state. It's not a
second set Wisconsin ID. In the lower, in the group of four.
This one?
Yeah, go in the next one over.
This one? This is the state identification card.
No, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd have to see it probably and consult.
I'll show it to Mary on Tuesday, she can tell me what she thinks.
Okay. Yep.
I have two different federal ID cards, one for the merchant marine and one for the transportation workers. Identification card gets me into places that you can't go.
So when it comes to one kind of great thing about the way that both proof of residence and state ID are worked out through through the state is that it's a list that's pretty specific. So if that particular ID that you're questioning is not on the list of acceptable documents, it's not an acceptable document. And that is written right into the state statutes. So the list is exhaustive. If it's on the list, it's good to go, as long as it meets the requirements on the list. If it's not on the list, unfortunately, a different form would have to be required. And again, there's no need to memorize all of these because they are all on the Badger books, but we do have handouts like these included in your materials to kind of help. Hope that answers your question.
In the Badger book, there will be a watermark next to a voter's name in a couple different situations. One of them is they're flagged as if they moved. So the state does checks every once in a while, and sometimes, I don't even know what the correct term.
Yeah, well, we'll get to it.
But, so if you see the watermark that says this voter might have moved, or have you moved, just ask them to verify it's still their current address, and that's the one that is on their voter registration. If it is, they can sign the poll book, get their ballot, and vote. If it is not, they'll have to re-register at the address they're currently at. But make sure that you ask them how long they've lived at this address, because if it is less than 28 days, they have to vote from their previous address. Also, if they come to your polling place and obviously have moved, they might need to go to a different polling place. So why it's flagged as they moved, the Wisconsin Elections Commission received information from either the DMV, post office, or other states indicating that their address may have changed. So the other watermark you might see in a Badger book is that an absentee notes. So if an absentee was issued to that voter and not returned, it just will say absentee issued. If it has been returned, it will say absentee returned. If you see the absentee issued watermark, ask them, did you receive the ballot? Yes. Did you return the ballot? And if they have not, they can proceed to vote at your polling place. If they did return it, even if they put it in the mailbox that morning, they cannot vote again. If it says absentee returned, you should not be issuing a ballot to the voter.
If you have a voter who has an absentee returned watermark and they are arguing with you that they did not return an absentee ballot, please send that voter to my office. We can pull that absentee certificate envelope that they would have signed and verify directly with that voter. But if it's showing absentee returned, it's because we have marked a ballot returned from that voter and they should contact us. Sometimes people forget that they voted a ballot. So they'll show up at the polls on election day and then they'll come to our office and we'll say, well, is this your signature? And they say, oh, yep, I did do that. So don't issue them a ballot if it says absentee returned. If they're giving you any grief whatsoever, please just send them to my office and we'll work it through them with them directly.
So at the ballot station, in order to receive the ballot, the voter must provide the slip that is printed out from the Badger book. The poll worker checks to see that the voter number provided is the correct number, so you can see the last number on your spindle and just make sure it's the next one in order. If correct, give the voter a ballot. If these steps are followed, the voter count should never be off. Tell the express vote voters to insert their ballot into the tabulator after they mark, because the express vote does not tabulate until that card they print out goes into the tabulator. So assisting voters, all voters have the right to receive assistance when marking their ballot. A voter can select anyone to provide the assistance other than the voter's employer or representative of a labor organization that specifically represents the voter. As an election inspector, you can and should provide assistance if requested. If an elector informs an election inspector that they require assistance, give the elector a voter number, record the name and address of the person assisting the elector on the poll list. This is in the Badger book. There is a spot that says voter needs assistance where you can enter the assister's information. The person who assists the voter must certify on the back of the ballot that it's been marked with their assistance before depositing the ballot into the ballot box.
On this ballot, it's actually on the front because it's only a one-sided ballot, so, sorry.
I thought so, that's why I paused.
Yeah. But it's a signature of a sister.
Then this incident should be recorded in the inspector's statement, just saying that a poll worker has assisted the elector.
What happens if, let's say, we have somebody come in, because this has happened to us a couple of times, where we had somebody who came in, an older person, and they don't request anything at the time that they're getting their ballot. They get over to the booth and stuff like this, and they say, oh, I can't read this, can somebody come over and read it for me? So do we have to go back in to theirs and put our name and address in and, okay,
Just
sign?
sign the ballot as the assister and make a note in the inspector statement.
Yeah, okay, because that's happened a couple
Yeah.
of times where,
And that's okay, because sometimes the font does get small for people, yeah. So overvotes. So like Mackenzie stated before, this is a vote for not more than 3 election. If the voter votes for 4, the DS200 will spit it back out saying they overvoted, and they can choose to cast the ballot or to not cast the ballot. And that's where if the voter chooses a spoil ballot, we'd put it in that spoil ballot's envelope, and they are only allowed to do this 3 times. Like she said, all absentees are processed at central count, so there should really be no reason to remake a ballot at the polling location. For voter registration, so a voter is required to register to vote if they have moved, changed their name, or is a brand-new voter. They must meet the following qualifications. They have to be 18 on election day or before, a U.S. citizen, have resided at their location for 28 days and not otherwise disqualified from voting. These questions are also on the Badger book when you are registering them to vote, so there's no need to memorize them. So you register the voters on the Badger book, and in part of the registration at the end, they have the option to vote right away. If for some reason someone comes to the polling place just to register to vote, you can do that. There is an option to just be done with the registration and have the voter not vote. When they do register, they do need to provide their Wisconsin driver's license number or state ID number. If they do not have this, they can provide the last 4 digits of their social security number. They also need a proof of residence document with their name and current address. If it's current on their driver's license, that would be all they need. If it is not, then they can provide additional proof of residence documents, which are also listed in the Badger book, and what's listed is what's accepted.
If you do have a voter that's just coming in to register and doesn't want to vote, just, if you could please notate that and their name on the inspector statement, if it's possible that that could make a count off when we're reconciling on the back end. So if you just make a note of that, that would be really helpful.
So just kind of touch base a little bit more on proof of residence. It must show the voter's name and current address. Common types we see are bank statements or credit card statements, their photo ID, a utility bill, residential lease. Like I said, if it's not listed in the Badger book, it's not accepted. And it can also be provided electronically. So if they come to you and their old address is on their driver's license, and you say, well, do you have electronic banking? Yep. Can you pull up a bank statement and they show it to you on their phone? That is acceptable as proof of residence. For registered write-ins, as of today, there are no registered write-ins. So all write-ins will be recorded under scattering. There will be, if there are registered write-ins, we will provide a list of those in your Monday packs. So how to keep your voter pad numbers reconciled. Occasionally check with the person at the tabulator to be sure your count matches your voter slips. Any jams on the tabulator, keep an eye on what the screen tells you.
Sorry? Sorry?
As to whether or not the jammed ballot was counted.
Now you can change.
Now you can change
I'm
it.
seeing an error in here, so I wanted to fix it, and I screwed it all up.
Pop quiz. If a voter moved from to District 1 from District 7 on February 20.
12?
What?
12?
On February 12th. And they show up to vote at District 1 polling place on Election Day, what do you tell a voter? What? Yep, so they have to go vote at their previous residence address to vote because they did not meet the 28-day requirement. Badger Book overview. So little overview because it's been a while since we've seen them. This is what the lock screen looks like. Swipe up or hit enter on the keyboard to enter the password. The password is still capital E Elections 2020. But just note that this is different than what logs you into the DS200 and the Express Vote. And this you'll have the people that have worked elections before, we used to have those cards that we supplied with the names and passwords. This will be on there, so you'll have this information.
How important is it for us to sign out and sign back on when we're moving from machine to machine?
The Wisconsin Elections Commission would really like that to happen. It's important that the chief does not stay logged in because they have more abilities in the Badger Book as the administrative side to run reports and change reporting units and things like that.
The guidance from the Elections Commission is that, yes, users should sign in and out when they use them. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
If somebody registers that day, can they still vote that day?
Yes. Yep. So once you logged in through the lock screen, you're going to double click on the Badger Book icon. It's still in the same spot as it always was, and then enter the credentials for the user. The chief will have to log in first in the morning on the server machine to open the polls. If the Badger Book issues 2 numbers in error, please put this on your inspector statement and include the numbers that were issued and the voter name. When entering the voter's name, remember to only type the first 3 letters of their last name, as it is a statewide search, so the more it searches per letter. We should not have lag issues. The Badger Books will once again be wired to the router, and with the new update, I'm really hoping everything goes smoothly. The voter's signature on the Badger Book, once again, does not have to be legible. They can just make an X if they want. Do not question their signature, just accept it. Also, you'll have supplemental pages. They'll be attached to the poll book cover sheet. They're usually blue. Use this in the event that you're not able to find someone in the Badger Book, kind of like Mackenzie explained before. If they register late, and sometimes this doesn't get generated into the Badger Book data, but they come in, want to vote, they usually have a white sheet of paper saying that they registered here. If you see that, you can use the supplemental list. If they don't have that and you're not sure if they registered, it never hurts to register them again if they have the information. And then anything that you add to the supplemental list, remember to add that to your end of the night totals because they wouldn't have the Badger Book slip at that point. This also happens when you have a John Smith Jr. that comes to vote, and you already selected him when John Smith Sr. came in. That's when you would just note that on the supplemental pages as well.
We've had paper that they did online. They came in and said, well, I just registered online, you know, and everything is, it says it was accepted and all of this. Those don't work.
They're not actually registered. So what happens when the registration is in like closed registration period, which we're in right now, you can only register to vote at the city clerk's office. So you can still go online at My Vote, go through the registration process, enter all your information, but that screen that they're printing off from, they're probably not reading it, because what it says is, here's your completed form, take this to your municipal clerk or your polling place on election day to register.
So it doesn't pay for them to do it online because they have to do it again at the polling.
Yep.
So if we didn't have Badger books and they brought that in, we could use that, but since everything is through the Badger book, that's where we would just re-enter all that information.
A suggestion, if they do something like that, have a scan thing that you can just, with the new scanner,
That's a really good
That
idea.
is a good idea.
then we don't have to do it.
We will write that down and tell the elections commission. That's, because I think sometimes they do print with barcodes on them, because it's in the database saying that it was like online, but we still need to see the rest of it. So, this is what the supplemental poll list looks like. Like I said, it's usually blue. You'll have one copy attached to your poll list cover sheet. This is where you'll put the voter number, voter name, voter address, and voter signature. Usually, because it's not in the Badger book, we suggest to use like a 1A or 1X, 2A, 2X, whatever you prefer, to put them on there, just because they're not gonna be the next one in order, because the Badger book is gonna print when the following voter comes in the next number, if that makes sense. As always, you'll have paper poll books on, yes?
Would you put the Badger number on there so you can compare it later or not? You give them 1A and then they do get the number?
No, because they're not gonna be processed through the Badger book, because they're not in there. Yep. In case of emergency, you will have paper poll books at your polling locations. These are in the teal or aqua bags that are sealed. If there's a power outage or Badger book total failure for some reason, that is where we would transfer over to the paper poll books. You have everything in there that you need. There's no need to go into this bag whatsoever unless there is an emergency. So curbside voting. Once again, we're having curbside voting signs, cones, and a doorbell at the polling location. So you will have to attach the doorbell and put the cones out. There, like Mackenzie said, there's Velcro on the sign to just where to put the doorbell. You also have to take the doorbell in and bring in the cones at the end of the night.
Okay, so you're saying there's a doorbell on that, is there another mate that goes inside and tells you that somebody's ringing the bell?
Yep, so there will be it will be plugged into your polling place. So it's just the part that goes outside, that you'll have to put out there. Just with it being Wisconsin and cold weathers, batteries die real fast if we leave them overnight. So that's why we're just asking you to place it on that Velcro and put the cones out in the morning and bring that in at night. Unregistered voters can also register to curbside, to vote curbside and register there. So the voting process, when an election inspector needs to announce that a voter has requested a curbside ballot and that inspectors are going to the vehicle to view the photo ID. So 2 inspectors need to handle this process. If for some reason having 2 inspectors go do this results in fewer than 3 inspectors left in the voting area, voting must stop until the other inspectors return. So I know sometimes at lunch breaks this might happen. So just pause the voting while your poll workers are out doing the curbside voting. The 2 inspectors speak to the voter. They ask if they are unable to enter the polling place. If the voter states they can enter the polling place, then they would not be eligible for curbside voting. Inspectors ask to see the photo ID. The voter does not sign the Badger book. So when you enter the voter information in the Badger book, there is a curbside voting option to select. And then the 2 inspectors will still initial the ballot. Voter number is given from the Badger book. You'll then deliver the ballot to the curbside voter in the secrecy sleeve. The curbside voter marks the ballot or has an assister if they do have one in the car to help them. The inspectors then bring the ballot back into the voter area and announce, I have a ballot offered by the voter's name, a voter who, as a result of a disability, is unable to enter the polling place without assistance. Does anyone object to the reception of this ballot? If an objection is made, then you must follow the challenge document procedure. If no objection is made, you can feed the ballot into the tabulator. Record any curbside voting on your inspector statement, so just that we know that it's happening.
Yeah, I have a question now.
Yeah.
With COVID, I know I had curbside people last year because of COVID, of which two of them really should getting something. How do you handling that?
I would still say, ask them if they're able to come into the polling place. And whatever they tell you, the answer from that is how you should proceed. So if they say no, you really shouldn't be questioning why, or for whatever reason, just follow through the curbside process. If they say, yeah, I can come in, then invite them in to vote in the polling place. Does,
Gloves and say, here,
Barb, does that answer your question? Okay.
So election day observers are allowed. The observer area is usually 3 to 8 feet, but with social distancing, we recommend 6 to 8 feet from the table where voters state their name and address and where they register to vote. So about 6 to 8 feet from the Badger Book table. And they must check in with the chief inspector, provide a photo ID, and sign the election observer log. There is an observer envelope in your supplies that has all of the information you need for observers. This,
standing there, are they, like, I'm here at the Badger Book is here. Are they on that side of it or on this side of it?
they can see what you're doing. They're allowed to see what you're doing, but they're not allowed to interfere with the election day flow. So if they're behind you and there's not room, that's the chief's call on where the position of them are.
And if they're in front of you and they're in the way of the voters, I would say that's probably not a good place to have them. We definitely don't want voters to have to walk and maneuver around them.
This is what the election observer log looks like. There's also name tags in the supplies, which would read that they are an election observer, and they should direct any questions or concerns to the chief. They can examine the poll list as long as, like I said, they don't interfere with the election responsibilities. And the election official can determine whether it is an appropriate time to allow the observer to examine the poll list, because this is examined through the Badger Book. So if you are processing voters and they want to see it at this minute, obviously it's disrupting election flow, so they would have to wait. They're not entitled to view registration forms, proof of residence documents, or the observer log, which they sign. Observers may ask the chief inspector or designee to view other documents, such as the poll list, and they are available to do so as long as it does not delay or disrupt the process. But this may not be possible if the polls are busy all day, and they may not view any confidential information. And the chief inspector or designee has a sole discretion to determine whether such documents can be viewed during the voting hours. There's also observer ordered to leave forms in the packet if an observer would be getting rowdy for some reason. I believe you usually suggest them to call, the chief to call you.
Yeah, there's a whole process for asking an observer to leave. It's, again, one of those very uncommon, hopefully you won't ever have to deal with it situations. If you have an observer and you can kind of feel that things are getting to that point where you may want to ask them to leave, feel free to give me a call and I can help guide you through that process. I can come out there, I can talk to the observer. Just know that there is a procedure in place if you have an unruly observer. You do have the authority to ask them to leave. There's just a process to follow. Of course, notate all this on your inspector statement and then loop my office in and we can assist you with that process.
on back. Yeah.
So there's limited room and we have 4 people that want to be observers.
Yep, you can limit it. Have them take turns. We have space for 3 of you. You can do half-hour shifts, however your chief wants to structure it. But you can absolutely limit it if you don't have room for a whole slew of observers. So then, switching gears a little bit to provisional ballots, there's only 2 situations where you would issue a provisional ballot. If a voter is registering to vote, they tell you that they have a valid Wisconsin ID or driver's license, but they don't have the number. They would still have to provide a different proof of residence document in order to register, but this would be where you could issue them a provisional license. The voter can actually call the DMV on election day and get that number. So if this is a voter's hangup, I might strongly encourage them to do that. A provisional ballot isn't actually counted on election day, and it's not a secret ballot. So anyone could potentially see how this voter's voting a ballot. Usually when people find out what goes into voting provisionally, they're less inclined to do that and more inclined to remedy whatever they're missing. The other option would be if a voter shows up to the polls and doesn't have an acceptable photo ID for voting. If it is well before 8 o'clock and they show up, you can say, hey, but if you go home and grab your driver's license, come back and you can vote. Again, once you kind of explain to them what provisional voting entails, I think folks are generally more likely to go the route of providing what they need. All of your provisional materials are blue. So then all of the procedures are outlined there. It's not a super common thing. I've seen less than a handful of them in the time that I've been with the city, but it is an option for voters. Provisional ballots cannot be issued if a voter is missing proof of residence document to vote. So if somebody's coming in and their state ID has their old driver's license on it and they don't have a bank statement or a credit card, they don't have something with their name and current address on it, unfortunately, that voter can't register to vote. They would not be issued a provisional ballot. You can certainly go through the list of acceptable proof of residence documents with them to see if they can come up with something and come back and register to vote, but not being able to register wouldn't grant them a provisional ballot privilege. Again, getting to the end of the night kinds of things. So all of the end of night paperwork should be reviewed to check that all of the blanks are filled in and all of the necessary signatures are there. We do check this when the chiefs come back at the end of the night, but a lot of times it's maybe just 1 or 2 people coming with the chief, and if we're missing 1 signature, we may have to be giving you a call on Wednesday morning. And after a long election day, really hate to call you guys on Wednesday morning to come in, but sometimes we have to. Good news, though, there's only 1 set of all of the paperwork this time. You don't have 3 sets, you don't have 2 sets, you just have 1 set. So shouldn't be too bad. Enjoy it while you've got it.
Also, with that, Jenny came up with the idea of putting sign flags on everything that needs to be signed. So look for those flags, and we're always open to feedback on whether that's helpful or not. But there should be anything that needs to be signed at the end of the night or throughout the day should have those little flags on it saying sign here.
Except the tapes. We can't do much about that. So counting write-ins should be done before you complete your tally sheet in case you need to adjust accordingly. Wisconsin law does not require that the voter fill in their oval for a write-in vote, and so the equipment is not going to pick up those votes. So if somebody writes in 3 names but didn't fill in any ovals, those 3 write-ins would count for whomever they wrote in, but you'll have to adjust your machine tape and tally sheet to reflect that. Again, if there are no registered write-ins, all write-ins would just be counted as scattering. You don't need to list their names specifically, anything like that. So separate all of the write-in ballots from the regular ballots. Again, all registered write-in votes would be counted. You'll have a list if there are any, and those names of the registered write-ins will appear on your tally sheet as well. So you won't have to worry about writing any write-in names on your tally sheet on election night. If there are registered write-ins, they'll be on that sheet. If there's not, any write-ins just going to go in that scattering line. Bum, bum, bum. We already covered all of this. If you find write-in votes where the oval's not filled in, just take a look and determine if that vote should be counted. If yes, change the machine tape to reflect that. So if there's 1 write-in that should have been counted, you're gonna give one to the write-in and you're gonna take one away from the undervote for that situation. Because if there's a vote but there's no oval, the machine would have counted that as an undervote. So that's how you adjust those tapes at the end of the night. Does that make sense?
That's only if they're registered.
Yep. Well, no, because you'd count them as a scattering. So if they wrote in Linda Nelson, I assume you're not gonna run as a registered write-in. So we'd take one vote away from undervote and add one to just general scattering. Mary, do you have a question? You good?
So she wrote herself in, we don't have to keep track of that name,
No.
we're just adding it from
Yep,
back into Underwood and
yep. If you think this is bad, Mary, you just wait till August. We're all in for a world of fun. Please don't. If you could please bundle your ballots at the end of the night, so keep all of your regular voted ballots together. If there's any registered write-in ballots, all other write-in ballots, and if you have any defective or objected to ballots, just kind of keep them together. So completing the tally sheets, there's a spot for overvotes and undervotes. You'll get these numbers from the tape. You may have to adjust your tape depending on your write-in situation. We already went over undervotes. Overvotes are when they vote for more than they can. This is what a correctly filled out tally sheet will look like. We always want the last number shown on the poll list or your Badger book to match the number of ballots that have gone into the tabulator. So those two numbers match. That's what we want to see. This is kind of just a snapshot of what your tally sheet will look like. When we're adding up in this, right here at the end, we're adding up all of those votes, that's gonna be way higher than your number of ballots and your number of voters because it's a vote for 3. So don't worry when you see that all of those numbers, you're like, well, I only had 100 voters, but there's 300 votes cast. Well, that's because it's a vote for 3 and we're adding all of those up. So as long as your number of ballots cast matches the number on your Badger book, that's what we're looking for. So at the end of the night, we want you to verify the seal number on the tabulator as the same as it was when the day started. Then you can remove this seal in order to close the polls. Just attach it to a scratch sheet of paper and that seal goes into the ballot bag at the end of the night. You can remove the thumb drive, place it in your red pouch. That comes back to me at the end of the night. There's also a thumb drive in the express vote that you'll need to remove. And then after you run the report on the Badger book, you'll remove the thumb drive from the Badger book. So at the end of the night, we're looking for you to bring 3 thumb drives back to City Hall. And I do have a detailed checklist for walking through the end of the night and running the report on the Badger book and all of that. So closing the polls, they close promptly at 8. The closing of the polls is announced by the chief inspector, and then if there's anyone in line, that end-of-line officer goes to stand there. After the last elector votes, the polling place stays open to the public, so we should not be locking the doors at 8 o'clock. It's open, it's a process. Candidates can come in too as you're running totals. As long as whoever's there isn't interfering with your end-of-night activities, they're welcome to be there. So again, verify the tamper-evident seal, initial your forms, and just make sure that the space is open to the public or any candidates that want to come in and observe. Yeah?
You close the polls, would it help if you put the sign polls closed? So when people come in, they notice that? I'm just asking.
I mean, we could include those if is that something that folks would like? No? I mean, if they come in to vote, you can just tell them, unfortunately, the polls close promptly at 8 p.m. And then at the end of the night, oh yeah.
So the observer would show up after 8 p.m.
Yep.
We have to record those?
You could just make a note on your inspector statement. They don't need to do the name tag or sign in on the observer log or anything like that. I would just jot on your inspector statement, so-and-so showed up to watch end-of-night activities.
what about when we get reporters that come in and wanna know what's going on?
As long as they're not interrupting the flow of what you're trying to do, they're welcome to be there. You're welcome to, the information, the forms are all public. They can ask you questions if you have time to answer them and want to. I think that cooperation's, what's that? As long as they're not interrupting, as long as they're not being disruptive to the process or anything like that.
So do we put that on the
Yep.
inspection station then?
Definitely. So when you're kind of packing everything up for the end of the night, if you have any oversized signs, those can go into the DS200 bin. Your binders can go in there. You shouldn't have any poll book binders. Any unused ballots can just get locked in the bottom of that DS200. Just try not to stuff that DS200 full because there's a lot of mechanisms kind of towards the top where the ballots come down, and we don't want to mess any of that up. But we'll be around on Wednesday to pick up anything that you haven't brought back to City Hall Tuesday night. Only one call for you all to make at the end of the night, and that is to the school clerk. So that number is going to be on your tally sheet for you. And that's it. Just one call to the school district, one set of all of the forms, and then bring them back to City Hall. If you could just take an extra minute at the end of the night to make sure your blanks are filled in, everything that needs to be signed is signed. This saves us time when reviewing everything as it comes in on election night. And like I mentioned, a few extra minutes on election night, I know it's a very long day, could save someone from having to stop in at City Hall Wednesday morning. So, like I said, I do hate to have to call you on Wednesday, but sometimes I do. Yeah.
Just going back to the media, they come in not so much after the polls close, but while people are voting, issues with cameras rolling,
No, media is allowed.
that they're allowed to bring in their
Yep.
recording equipment.
Yep.
Are they allowed to take pictures? I thought that they weren't.
They can take pictures, they can't take pictures of voted ballots. If somebody from the media is coming in and you're like, oh, I don't really know, this feels a little weird, give my office a call and we'll walk you through whatever they're asking for or doing, but the state,
But voters there and I don't want my picture in a paper or whatever.
I would think that I would think that the reporter should probably respect that.
Because I can remember,
They're not allowed to take their picture without
Yeah.
because I can remember when we had, well, in 2020, when we had people standing in line, miles of them, waiting to get to their votes and that, we had a reporter come in and said, well, can I take a picture? And it's like, he said, well, you have to go down the line and ask each and every one of these people if they would be okay to take their picture.
I think that's a very fair way to address that. Yep, absolutely. Mary? I'm sorry? Yes, please. Thank you.
Is the media considered observer or not?
No, because they're not really there to observe the election day procedure. Anytime that I've been interacted with the media, they typically want to get in, get whatever they're looking for, and then they've got other stuff to do. But definitely notate that on your inspector statement if you do have media presence on election day.
The only other thing you might get is like sometimes the particular individual that's running for office or whatever, they have a representative that comes there and they get the totals and they call it in and they
Yep, and that's totally fine. Yep. And then when in doubt, just ask. City clerk staff, we're available all day, starting at 6 a.m. until the last district comes back to City Hall or central count's done, whatever happens later. And we are available to answer questions. We can walk you through solutions, stop out at your polling place to address any issues. Just keep our numbers handy. We're here to help. We're happy to help. I would much rather you call me 15 times on election day than just kind of wing it and guess and hope for the best. So if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. It's never a bother. I'm always happy to take your calls. Just again, another spot of my phone numbers. I try to keep it in lots of different spots for you. Feel free to throw these in your phone and reach out. Even if you have questions that come up between today's training and election day, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So just another plug for our chief inspectors. They do earn a little more scratch for working election day. So the payment for it, the working the election is for the full day is $150 for the chief inspector. The election inspectors is $120. You'll all get $15 for attending training today. That W-9 form is needed on file in order to be paid. So if you just see your name on one of those W-9 forms over there, that's because we don't have one on file for you. Fill it out, leave it with me, and I will get that to the appropriate parties to make sure you get paid for all of your hard work. And that's it. Here's a list of our upcoming elections for this 2022-2023 term. We have February 15th. Shortly after that, we'll have, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple questions.
Okay.
And I'm probably in a minority, but since the Badger book, we've gotten rid of two-person verification and added a format where the signature is awkward for the voter to easily sign. I question, what would we do if we actually needed to verify these signatures? In the past, we've been told them today that an X is okay.
That's good.
I understand that X is legal by WIC, but it's because of the format that people can't sign, not just basically the voter. Isn't some of this causing declining voter integrity that we are having problems with now? And also, who instituted having WIC, the Badger book? Was that initiated by WIC?
There's a lot of questions there. Let me try to back up.
One is asking about,
So I'm not sure what you mean by the two-factor authentication. The voter,
have two people that would look.
oh, sure. That's just from the state. So everything that we do is following state law. In terms of an X, a voter can sign their name as an X on their absentee certificate. They can sign their name on an X on a paper poll book. Again, that's just state law. The state of Wisconsin doesn't currently, it's in state statute. So the state of Wisconsin doesn't currently have signature verification where we would be verifying a signature next to, say, a DMV record or something like that. If that were to happen in the future, the Wisconsin Election Commission would have to produce guidance and make adjustments so that we're all in compliance. So I can just tell you everything that we've gone over today and everything that's set up at the polling place on Election Day is in compliance with state law and state statute.
So was it WIC that told Manitowoc to do
No, we opted for it. Yep.
And who does that? Is that by the council or?
The purchase of the Badger books was approved by the Common Council. You're welcome. Sure.
These absentee ballots are sent to the homes prior to election.
Like nursing homes?
No, like say the husband's on hospice or something, and they come down here and they sign that they want the absentee ballot sent to their house for them to fill out, and then they can send it back.
Okay.
The hospice patient died. They're still getting these ballots sent, and they're fine. The wife can walk, she can do everything, she can do anything. Every year, she's getting these sent from here. Why? Why don't they have to re-register or something? I don't understand.
I don't know that I understand your question. So the deceased person is,
Gone, but they came here to apply for them because they couldn't get down here to vote. So they're sent to the house
for the person that's now deceased?
for both of them.
Okay, so it's, as with all, so the state laws regarding requesting an absentee ballot, filling out your voter registration are all, like, the onus is totally placed on that voter. So that voter gets to decide, yes, I certify, when they register as like an indefinitely confined,
They came here first, and then there's
it's not any of our jobs to question what the voters are telling us. They certify to their particular status. So then if there were to be any issue, and if they're lying, that voter would then be prosecuted. I don't,
keep sending indefinitely. Isn't there a rule or a law?
the voter certifies that they're indefinitely confined. We don't have any way to, there's not, well, tell me how you're indefinitely confined. Tell me why you're confined. They're just certifying that they are.
But they don't have to, you're not questioning or anything. They just keep indefinitely sending these out.
I think what she's trying to say is,
But they don't want to because
there
There you go.
let's say I come in here to sign for an absentee
That's the
ballot,
law.
because I'm, for some reason, incapacitated for a year. But now I get an absentee ballot all of the time because I am no longer
So when you signed up for those indefinitely confined, you would have, there's a spot that you mark on your absentee request that you sign that says, I certify that I am indefinitely confined due to blah, 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 blah. If you don't, and that's state law. So we don't have any say over that unless the state legislature decides to make a change. So everything we're doing is in compliance with state statutes as they exist today. When they change, we adjust. But unfortunately, we've got to go with what the state law is right now.
So how would I come in to stop?
You could give me a call and say, hey, I don't want this anymore. And I'd say, great, I'll deactivate it for you. Or you could stop in, you could write me a letter, send an email.
But if somebody died, they can't come in to,
Well, no, but we do routine death checks to deactivate deceased voters, so they wouldn't continue to receive them. Did you have another question?
No, I was gonna say, my motor, died, back in February.
I'm sorry.
Got the notification from the county, I think back in August, that her voting was deactivated.
Yep, so we do have routine death checks that happen. So this is just a list of the upcoming elections. Definitely plan on one for April, August, and November this year. There for sure will be one next April and possibly February if a primary is needed for that spring election. I know we kind of jumped right into the questions. Did anyone else have any other questions? Yeah.
Being first time, do you bring food along?
Totally up to you. Yeah, most spaces, yeah, you're definitely welcome to bring snacks, beverages, food. I'm expecting that it'll probably be a bit slower, so there should be plenty of time to rotate breaks throughout the day for folks to take like a lunch break or whatever. Great question. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah, Mary?
for new people, make sure you get your chief, and you can call your chief inspector and say, am I gonna get a break?
Apparently if you work with Mary, you won't. Yikes.
Work for me, you get 2 breaks.
Break all day long.
Did you have another question? I saw your hand kind of up again.
We can vote that day, right?
You can. Yep. You'll have to go to, of course, your correct polling place. If you're concerned about getting there or anything, we do have in-person absentee voting going on now today and then tomorrow as well. But again, you should have plenty of time for a break. So if you're not working at your polling place to get there and vote, you absolutely can do that. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, Harriet.
Okay, on page 43, what can be placed in the ballot bin? That's the machine. Okay, it says poll workers and structural binders, but they're in here.
Oh, well then don't put it in there.
Don't put it in here?
Don't put it in your DS, put it wherever you want. We'll find it.
And we have no binders for the poll books.
Just in that teal bag, correct? Yep. Yep, sorry for that confusion.
We don't get the poll books anymore, or
There-
the training books anymore.
Oh, individually? Yep. If you need more, we have more. We can get more out. They seem to maybe be more than was needed, so we tried to scale that back a little bit. Okay, well, thank you all again for coming to the training. Thank you all again for your commitment to helping out with the voters for the city of Manitowoc. Your hard work is so very appreciated. Again, keep my number handy. Give me a call, give me a text. Let me know if you have any questions at all. I'm definitely happy to help.